Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. The United Nations was created to bring countries together in times of crisis. But today, with wars raging, geopolitical rivalry intensifying, and trust between nations under strain, many are questioning whether the current system is equipped to meet the challenges ahead. At that time, the race to choose the next UN Secretary General is also beginning to take shape. On Thursday, candidates for the world's top diplomatic post will gather at the Jeju Forum to share their vision for the future of the organization. In our second installment of the Jeju Forum series, we take a closer look at the challenges facing the United Nations, the leadership it needs, and what to watch for as the race for the next Secretary General gets underway. To discuss these issues, we are joined by Susana Malcorra, former Argentine Foreign Minister and former UN Under-Secretary General, and former Chief of Staff to Ban Ki-moon, and also a former Secretary General candidate herself. Ms. Malcorra, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
So let's begin our discussion right away. Many analysts these days describe the world today as increasingly fragmented, with wars, geopolitical rivalry, and growing divisions, of course, across many regions. Could you tell us how serious is the crisis that we're facing in the multilateralism aspect?
Well, it is clear that the moment is a difficult one, that the stakes are very high, and that the system is under huge strain, as you said in your introduction. Having said that, it's also clear that the challenges the world faces are interconnected challenges, are challenges that no one country can resolve on its own. So we face a dilemma. At a moment where the UN, the system is really under strain and under criticism, the system is more needed than ever before. So it's not a matter whether we face the failure or the fall of the system. It is a matter of how we reinvent the system to become useful to the challenges of today.
Right. So considering the current situation, we're living at a time when major powers are increasingly acting alone. What kind of role should the United Nations be playing at this point?
Well, I think it's very critical to go back to the principles of the United Nations that are laid in the Charter that was written 80 years ago in 1945. It is a very, very clear message, the one we read there. The United Nations is there to make sure that we don't go through the same situation that the world went through after World War II. So this is key. Peace and security should be at the center. And it's also clear that the ones who created that charter, some of the ones who created the charter, are some of the ones who today are not holding those principles. So the UN Secretary General, should be the person to call on those who are obliged to do it to uphold the principles of the charter and to work following them, and to come back to the negotiating tables when issues arise and need clear solutions.
Definitely. So the challenge for the UN is not just to stay relevant, but continue striving to remain effective in this increasingly divided world. Now, you have served at the highest levels of the UN for more than a decade, I believe. Where do you believe the organization is most urgently needs reform at?
Well, I like to say always that it's not a matter of reform only. It's a matter of really reinventing, that's the word I like to use itself, because it goes beyond a process of reform. It has to come back to those basic principles, and it has to come back to what is more fundamentally needed today. Let me mention a few things. Most of the challenges beyond peace and security and the lack of restraint, as we just mentioned, we are seeing that the world is facing climate change challenges, that we are not stepping up to them, that climate change continues to move farther and faster than we are ready to address the issue. We see questions of migration that become more and more dire, and that bring countries and governments back to their own selves and closing their borders. We see technology and in artificial intelligence in particular as big moving parts that need collective addressing. All those things require a shared perspective, require a common answer. And the only global political space that can do that is the United Nations. As limited as it can be in its answers sometimes, as much as that we can say that often has not been up to the task, what we need is to recreate those fundamentals and make sure that the leadership of the world comes back to them. This is not only a matter of the UN per se, the UN as an institution, as important as it is. It's also a matter of the leaders of the world, the 193 leaders of the world that take part in the United Nations, to reconvene and to really recommit to those principles, because if we don't do that, the results can be really damaging.
Right, a very important message you said. We should really go beyond just reforming and go into reinventing. Now, when it comes to that, I believe the leadership itself is very important. You were yourself a candidate for the Secretary General in the year 2016. How different is this job now facing this next Secretary General compared to a decade ago?
Well, I think history evolves, reality evolves, and we are seeing, as you mentioned earlier, a more fractured world with more collective challenges that I just described. So one could argue that it's even more challenging than what it was in 2016, where we were coming out of the Paris Agreement, we were coming out of the agreement of the Agenda 2030, where there was a sense that the collective a view of the world was more important than what it is today. It was at a time where there was a sense of the possible. Today, there is more a sense of fatalism, which is, I think, part of what needs to be addressed in this changing moment of leadership in the United Nations. We cannot allow themselves to think that there is not a possibility. We always need to think that there is a way to address the issues, and that's why the profile of a new leader becomes critical. A new leader that is vocal, that really speaks up about the issues at hand, and not only speaks up, is there where the needs are, shows the world what is needed. And I will argue the power of the Secretary General, as challenging as this might sound, is very, very important. And it is important not only to raise the profile of the issues, but to bring them to light beyond what sometimes is a very, very dark period.
Right, so we're seeing a lot of changes and more challenges ahead. And as you've mentioned, it's a very important moment at this time. But like you've said, many observers say this is one of the most consequential Secretary General selections in years. Could you elaborate for our viewers why this election is particularly more important?
Well, I work under the leadership of Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. It was a very, very good period of the United Nations where he led and we collectively were able to achieve many things. And I just mentioned two. One of them is the Paris Agreement, another one is Agenda 2030. There was a sense of hope at the time. I think one of the things we need to do is to restore the sense of hope. We need to bring the UN to the center. We need to bring the UN to the table where the issues are being discussed, be that in peace and security, be that in development, be that in human rights. We need the UN again being part of the conversations. That's something that we see missing today. And I believe that's one of the reasons why the UN is questioned, because it's often not seen clear enough at the times where its role should be central. That's why it's so consequential who is chosen, and why it's so important, and we are discussing that here in Jeju, to bring the right profile of a person of principle, a person that is persuaded that the power, the convening power of the UN, the persuasive power of the Secretary General, the power to really bridge between divides, the power to bring that charter and its principles back again to the conversation is essential, and that requires somebody who is ready to take calculated risk, because that's exactly what is needed.
Right. So it does really seem like the next Secretary General will have a lot on his plate. So speaking of which, what do you think is the biggest challenge awaiting the next Secretary General of the UN?
If you allow me, I'm going to correct you. It's going to have on his or her shoulders. Right. Because we deeply believe that there should be a Madam Secretary General. There is an opportunity after 80 years to have the peoples of the world fully represented, and half of the peoples of the world are women. So we hope, and that's one of the things we do as the organization that I preside, GWL Voices, we advocate for a woman Secretary General. And let me mention this to you. We are not talking about women for the sake of women. What we are talking is about a woman because we see the type of leadership that is needed very well represented by women leaders. Women who are up to the task, women who are ready to deliver, women who are ready to bridge and to give a hand in order to promote a solution. Women who are ready to take a no, but then go back again and try again. And that's something that we believe is very much a woman's characteristic. We don't say only women, men also, some men do have them, but it is an opportunity to have a woman, as it was in 2016. You might recall this. At that time, everybody was speaking about it's high time for a woman. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said that at that time, and it didn't happen. We hope this time, with these challenges, will provide this basic solution, basic opportunity for a woman to become the Secretary General.
Right, definitely. I really apologize for my language. I've gotten mistaken over there. But yes, of course, we're open to...
No need to apologize.
Various, right. And so speaking of which, like we've mentioned a lot of challenges. Going back to our initial question, could you pinpoint for us what about the biggest challenge that awaits the next Secretary General?
Well, it's clear that the UN was based on a basic agreement that cooperation did not go against a sovereign right of a nation, that both things could come together and complement each other. That's the principle behind the creation of the United Nations. That principle has been broken in many instances. The notion of restraint by the big powers, that restraint was in their self-interest, has also been broken. So I will argue that probably those are the first things that should be tackled. Coming back to the notion of what is in our shared interest. Then, of course, some of these new things that are on the table, some are new, some are not so new, but are still unresolved. Like we said, climate change. The commitments made in the Paris Agreement are far behind, are falling behind. Some of the ones who signed those commitments have stepped out of the table. The commitments made around the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals are lagging behind. Those are things that need attention. But what is critical here is to create this sense of possibility, this sense that something can be done together, that there is an opportunity for us to rebuild our common house. Because unless we do it as a common house, we are not going to have a second planet, as Secretary General Ban Ki-moon used to say when we were working together. So there are many tasks there. And the one thing we need to recognize is that there is not magic wand that the Secretary General, be him or her, will have. What is important is that we recreate this notion of belonging to a system that works for the peoples, that gives hope to the people, and that provides solutions to the people. It's something that will not happen overnight, but bringing light to the United Nations again, putting the United Nations at the fore, bringing the United Nations to where it's needed, in the front lines, where things are happening, where sometimes these days is absent, is absolutely central. And I think that's what should be done by the next Secretary General.
Thank you so much for that. Now, one place where these kinds of discussions and issues will be actually held this year is at the Jeju Forum, of course, which will feature a dialogue with candidates for the next UN Secretary General. What is the significance of bringing the candidates together in this kinds of setting?
Well, you are right to say the Jeju Forum has provided a platform. We are partnering as GWF Voices with the Ban Ki-moon Foundation and with the UN Foundation to bring those candidates together. We have done that before in Geneva. We are coming here to the Jeju Forum, to Asia, to expose the candidates to closer to a very important part of the population who is growing fast and who needs to hear from the candidates. I think it is very important to see them together, to be able to compare how they present themselves, how they react to the questions, how they propose things, each one of them in a different manner, because even though this is not a popular context, in the end, this will be decided essentially by the Security Council and approved by the General Assembly. What the people see can make a big difference. And having the candidates connected to the audiences, and in this case, especially with the Asian audience, is very important.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like this dialogue would provide a valuable opportunity to see how these candidates think, and also would eventually lead the organization as well. Now, regardless, of the background or gender, of course, without asking you to endorse anyone, what kind of qualities would you be looking for in a strong Secretary General candidate today?
Well, first of all, no doubt, a principled person, a person who adheres to the principles of the Charter, somebody with independence, somebody who will be able to step up and call the powers to what is happening and suggest solutions to those who sometimes are not following those principles of the Charter. So principle is one of them. The other thing that I believe is very, very important is that the person is action-oriented. We need somebody ready to move and go there where the UN is needed. Somebody who, as I said earlier, is ready to take calculated risk, not any risk, of course, but that has enough appetite for risk to take decisions that sometimes may sound that go a little bit too far, because not doing that really risks the United Nations to fall in a position where it's not considered any longer. Somebody who is ready to build strong teams, because again, no one single person can solve these things. The person needs to build a team with diversity, with different opinions, with different perspectives, with the representation of the world that can really read the reality and have answers to that reality in a creative manner. And of course, somebody who listens well, but at the same time, at a certain point, takes decisions. And taking decisions at the right moment is fundamental, because the time passes fast, and the issues that the Secretary General will be facing, and the UN will be facing, and the world is facing, require fast answers.
Wow, definitely. They are very important leadership qualities that we would be looking for, and which is more important than ever before. Now, before we conclude our discussion tonight, finally, drawing on your experience both inside the UN and as a former candidate yourself, if you could give one piece of advice to the next Secretary General, what could it be?
Well, my piece of advice is to be yourself. Because if you try to please, and by pleasing you find yourself in the position, soon you'll be in trouble because you will not be truthful to your principles. So it's a very delicate balance, of course, because in the end we recognize that there are 5 permanent members that have a strong saying on who the person will be. But being yourself, being able to portray yourself under the right perspective, and bringing your own self to speak with all member states, the 193, the 15 members of the Security Council, and the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, is central to coming on board under an opportunity to make a difference.
A very valuable perspective from someone who has seen this process so many times from different angles. Thank you so much for your insights today, Ms. Mok-yeon. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I wish you and your audience a good evening.
Thank you. Now, that concludes our discussion tonight. That'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.